The bus stopped with a long hiss of air, and Jacob Mercer sat frozen in his seat long after everyone else had stepped off. Outside the dusty window was the small American town he had left behind 3 years earlier, the town that once felt like home but now looked strangely unfamiliar. His fingers tightened around the worn duffel bag resting on his knees, the bag that carried everything he had left from the war. But the real weight wasn't in the bag. It was in his chest. The war had taken more than time from him. It had taken peace, sleep, and the quiet version of himself that his little daughter once knew. When Jacob finally stepped off the bus, the cold autumn wind brushed against his face like a reminder that life had moved on without him. Before we continue this emotional story, take a quick moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of compassion, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even broken lives can be rebuilt. Jacob walked slowly down Maplewood Street in a quiet neighborhood outside Columbus, Ohio. The houses looked the same, but everything felt smaller somehow. Maybe it was because the world he had seen overseas was so brutal that ordinary life now felt fragile. His boots crunched on the gravel driveway of the modest home he had once shared with his wife, Claire. The house was still standing, though the paint had begun to peel slightly, and the porch light flickered faintly in the evening air. Claire had passed away the year before he returned home, a sudden illness. The letter had reached him weeks after the funeral. By the time Jacob received the news, the war had already carved a deep silence into his soul. Now the house held only one person who mattered. Inside, sitting quietly on the living room floor with a coloring book, was his 6-year-old daughter, Hannah. She looked up slowly when the door opened. For a moment, neither of them moved. Children grow quickly, but absence makes that change feel even sharper. Hannah had longer hair now, tied into a loose ponytail, and she looked older than the little girl Jacob remembered from his last memory before deployment. Her eyes were cautious, curious, and slightly unsure, as if she was trying to recognize a face from an old photograph. Jacob knelt down carefully, his heart pounding harder than it ever had during combat. Hannah walked forward slowly and wrapped her small arms around him. She didn't say anything at first, she simply held him. That quiet hug broke something inside Jacob that the war had hardened. Life after that moment wasn't simple. Returning from war was nothing like the movies. There were no easy victories. Jacob struggled to sleep at night. Loud sounds made him flinch. Some mornings he woke up already exhausted. Being a father again felt both beautiful and terrifying. He wanted to be strong for Hannah, but strength felt like something he had left behind overseas. Days passed quietly. Jacob tried to rebuild a routine. He cooked breakfast, walked Hannah to school, and spent long afternoons searching for work, but the shadows of war followed him everywhere. Sometimes he would stare out the window for hours, lost in memories he didn't want to relive. Their neighbor, Thomas Whitaker, had lived next door for years. He was a retired mechanic in his late 60s with gray hair, rough hands, and the kind of steady presence that made people feel safe. Thomas had watched Hannah many evenings when Claire was sick, and he had been one of the few people who kept checking on the house after she passed away. One chilly afternoon, Jacob was sitting on the front porch, while Hannah played quietly in the yard. The sky was pale and cloudy, and the wind carried the faint scent of fallen leaves. Thomas walked over slowly, holding 2 cups of coffee. He sat down beside Jacob without saying much at first. For a while, they both watched Hannah drawing shapes in the dirt with a stick. Then Thomas said one sentence that would quietly change everything. He told Jacob that the bravest thing a soldier can do is not surviving the war, but learning how to live again after it. That sentence settled into Jacob's mind like a small spark. No one had said it to him that way before. People had thanked him for his service. They had shaken his hand and called him a hero. But no one had acknowledged the real battle he was fighting now, the quiet one inside his own heart. From that day forward, something began to shift. It wasn't dramatic or immediate. Healing rarely is. But Jacob started taking small steps. He began fixing things around the house again. The broken porch railing, the creaky kitchen cabinet, the loose fence board in the backyard. Each repair felt like stitching a small piece of his life back together. Thomas often stopped by with advice, tools, or just conversation. Sometimes they spoke about cars, sometimes about baseball, and sometimes they sat in silence, which turned out to be just as valuable. Hannah slowly began to laugh more. Evenings became their special time together. They would cook dinner, read storybooks, or sit on the couch watching old movies. Jacob still had difficult nights, but the moments of peace started to grow longer. Winter passed, and spring arrived with soft rain and blooming trees. One afternoon at Hannah's school, a teacher asked parents to attend a career and inspiration day. Jacob almost didn't go. Crowds still made him uncomfortable, and he felt unsure about standing in front of strangers. But Hannah had drawn a picture of him in his uniform with the words, "My dad is my hero," written in bright crayons. So he went. Standing in that classroom, Jacob spoke quietly about service, courage, and protecting others. But he also said something unexpected. He told the children that heroes are not just people who fight battles. Heroes are people who help others heal. He glanced toward the back of the classroom, where Thomas had quietly come to support him. For the first time in years, Jacob felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Hope. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. There were still difficult days. There were still memories that visited without warning, but the darkness no longer controlled every moment. Jacob found a job at a local auto repair shop. His hands were good with tools, and working beside other mechanics reminded him that ordinary life could be meaningful again. Hannah continued to grow into a bright, joyful child who filled the house with laughter. And Thomas remained a quiet constant next door, always ready with advice, coffee, or a simple conversation. Now, before this story reaches its ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment the word hope below if you believe that even the deepest wounds can heal with time and kindness. Years later, Jacob would still remember the moment on the porch when Thomas spoke that simple sentence. Not because it solved everything instantly, but because it reminded him that survival wasn't the final step. Living again was. If this story touched your heart in any way, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who might need encouragement today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories like this one. Because sometimes, all it takes to change someone's life is one sentence spoken at the right moment.